Hi there. Are you doing a lot? Are you highly successful? Is that working for you? Many leaders get stuck in execution mode. You reach a point when doing more actually isn't working for you anymore. You know you're capable, you know you're trusted, your team depends on you, and yet your days are filled with back-to-back meetings, constant decisions, and an endless stream of issues that somehow land on your back. You're respected as the person who gets things done. That's why everybody comes to you. Eventually, the question starts showing up. Why am I working so hard and still feeling stuck? Many leaders I coach in 45 countries actually say the same thing. I feel I'm stuck in execution. These leaders I coach, they're solving problems, they're answering questions and keeping everything moving. They're really brilliant. I highly admire them. But the more responsibility they take on, the harder it becomes to step back and think strategically. Over time, the strength that made them successful actually starts to limit their influence. The shift, it's not about working less. It is about learning to lead differently. Let's talk about the leadership trap of over-responsibility. Many leaders unknowingly fall into what I call this over-responsibility loop. It usually begins with good intentions. They care about their team, they care about results, they love their work, they want things done well, and they naturally like to step in to help, and it's become a habit. But then gradually something changes and they start realizing that they're just carrying too much. And what I see with most of them is that they're in back-to-back meetings with no thinking space. In other words, actually no buffer space between meetings. They say yes because explaining and delegating is slow and they move very fast. And they can do things much faster than if they would delegate it to somebody else and explain it to somebody else, and then they would have to manage that task. It would just be another task to manage. And becoming the person everyone goes to solve problems, I see that a lot. You know, feeling responsible for everyone's performance, having little time for strategic thinking, being respected inside your team, but invisible at senior levels. I want to repeat that one because it's really great if you're respected and acknowledged by your team and even by your peers. But what you do need to do is gain visibility at more executive levels if you want to move into a VP role. This pattern continues and it continues until you actually start feeling the cost. There are a lot of hidden costs of this overfunctioning. For example, emotional fatigue. I see it. Emotional fatigue leads to mental fatigue. There's this constant urgency. There's frustration that often plays in the background. And there is strategic thinking, but it's not as much as you could be doing. Teams become dependent on you. Your team is dependent on you. What you're often thinking, and this is what the leaders I coach sometimes are worried about, that if I stop, everything will fall apart. But really, the system is dependent on you. When everything runs through you, your influence is limited. Can you imagine if you had to become a multiplier and instead of just doing everything yourself, you started coaching and empowering many people around you, and you moved into a higher version of yourself, a more strategic version of yourself? Let's understand a little bit more about why this working harder stops working. Because you know that leadership is not just about execution. It's hard to think clearly when you're under constant pressure. And all the leaders I'm coaching are under a lot of pressure. So they need to manage that too. you may be overwhelmed, and when you're overwhelmed, the brain naturally goes into what I call survival mode. That's the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for executive functions. The prefrontal cortex that's responsible for creativity, for strategic thinking, becomes much less available. Then what happens is your decisions become reactive. So you're not responding, you're on automatic pilot. And then when you become that kind of leader that you're reactive, you're fast, but then you're just on repeat mode, and delegation becomes harder because your trust decreases, your perspective narrows. And the result is this leadership style where you're constantly busy. And that is exactly where many talented leaders get stuck. Because of this endless loop of being busy and being in execution mode, I created this mindful act leadership model to help leaders move out of this over responsibility and into more influence. It's a framework called mindful act, and ACT stands for 3 essential leadership dimensions. The word ACT is an acronym because you need to do something. The A is achieve, and it's really about leading yourself first. The first step is awareness. What we want to do is ask ourselves, what impact do I want to make? Where's my time going? Am I creating space to think? When you start asking these questions, the leaders I coach start discovering that they're attending meetings that they no longer need to be in. Sound familiar? Or they're solving problems their team could solve. And the strategic thinking begins when the leaders, you, the leaders I coach, reclaim their attention and their energy. This starts with awareness. That's the A. And I want to talk about the C. The C is all around connection and around strengthening relationships. Because leadership is all around the people you work with, it's relational. And how you show up in conversations shapes how your team operates. Key questions that are asked in this connect is, are you present? How present are you in meetings? Or are you multitasking because you've got so much that's on your plate? Are you delegating clearly and following up effectively? Many of the managers I'm coaching do delegate, but then they disappear because they give autonomy or they micromanage. And you have to find a balance. In the beginning, real leadership sits between these two polar ends of delegating and then disappearing, where we want to actually support more. And this other side of micromanaging, where you, what's going on? Can you give me an update? And so there needs to be clarity there. There needs to be checking in there, checking in and trust. You need to give some trust and trust yourself as well, that you know that your team member can actually do this, but with your support or support of somebody else. Now we've done A, which is the achieve. We've done the C, which is the connect. And T is the thrive. And the thrive is around expanding beyond your team, because as a leader in execution mode, you're very busy with your team and you are very busy in dealing with maybe cross-functional teams, but what about leading up? Leadership growth requires moving beyond the team and being respected not only within your team and within your function, but you want to be visible across the organization, maybe involved in key strategic projects if you want to be more strategic and also be promoted, getting to that next level. Strategic leaders actively build relationships across the system with senior leadership, with cross-functional teams, and with key stakeholders. The shift from team execution to system influence often leads to promotion and broader leadership impact. Let's meet Russell. Russell managed 7 people, and he is a really good example of how he created this shift, and it was transformational. What is transformational? Transformational is when something sticks with you and actually leads to a change in your identity. Because just think, moving from being this leader in execution mode to being a strategic leader, you are a changed person. You operate differently when you start seeing the future, when you start impacting on the organization, making the organization future fit. You're moving to a completely different role. Russell was managing 7 people, but his calendar was full. Couldn't breathe. And when I met him, he had no breaks in his day. He didn't even know he'd forgotten that he learned in a time management course that there is such a thing called buffers, because in his organization, it was really okay to go from meeting to meeting. This emotional fatigue that I explained, he actually felt the anxiety. He was stressed, he felt anxious, and he often felt he was behind. He really wanted a promotion, and he'd been promised in a way a promotion, but it just seemed to be falling through the cracks. And he felt he was invisible to senior leadership. He wasn't in their meetings, and he was very, very busy just keeping up with everything. The first step was very simple. He created space. He began removing unnecessarily meetings. He started delegating more, because it wasn't that he didn't know how to delegate, but he'd just gotten into this over-responsibility loop. By working with me, he first of all broke that loop. He was very eager to create these pauses between meetings. He created buffers and pauses that allowed him to think again before and after meetings. With these pauses, he regained perspective. He began contributing more meaningfully in senior meetings rather than just simply executing tasks. I'm sure you won't be surprised in knowing that his visibility started to increase, his influence expanded, and very soon he actually received that promotion that he had been working toward, and it started happening. And so the shift was not about working harder. It was about leading with intention instead of urgency. This leadership shift, it is about working differently. And many capable leaders that are carrying too much responsibility, they solve problems, they fix things, and keep everything moving. But, when everything runs through you, your influence stays limited. Leaders who grow into more senior roles begin to change how they operate. If before they were in over effort, now they become much more focused and focused impact. If before they were in rescuing mode, rescuing the team, rescuing everybody that came to ask, they learned to say no. They began empowering and delegating. If they were in reaction mode and reacting to problems, before they would reflect before acting. If there was emotional exhaustion before, it shifted into emotional steadiness. And just imagine how that feels inside. Proving themselves was a constant in the past, and now it became, instead of proving, to contributing strategically. And that's how most people make their way up the corporate ladder, is that you need to prove yourself. But once you're up there, that needs to change. You need to contribute in a new way. None of these shifts happen overnight. They have to be really intentional. And to change how you think and how you show up, something needs to shift. You need to stop controlling everything. The leaders that are coached, they begin creating the conditions where their teams start doing the thinking as well, and thinking how the business can grow. That's actually part of the Thrive piece of the ACT model, is we look in Thrive how we can create a bigger impact in the business. The leaders I coach actually take business impact into their teams that they're not even doing the strategic work themselves. They're bringing it into their teams and helping their teams to think strategically as well. It's shared leadership, and there's a real leadership shift, and the influence is compounded. Strategic leadership does begin with presence. And the leaders I coach do not work less. They work differently. And they replace control with clarity. They replace urgency with intention. They replace constant activity with thoughtfulness and thoughtful influence. When the shift happens, several other important things happen. Communication becomes clearer, and that's really important. Teams step up more. Your visibility influences and increases, and you actually feel calmer. You feel calmer and you're more energized because your energy is not being drained by being always on. Most importantly, leaders regain that space to think strategically again. If this resonates with you, I want you to try one small experiment today. Pause for 30 seconds, take a breath. Ask yourself, where am I carrying responsibility that no longer needs to be mine? Leadership growth begins with seeing clearly. And what I'd like to offer you is a simple practice that you can do daily. And on my website, askyourcoach.com, I have what's called the Daily Leadership Reset Tool. It's a 5-minute tool that hundreds of leaders do to check in and help themselves move out of reaction mode and back into strategy. And so grab it now. It's free on coach.com. That's the Daily Reset. Let me know what you think. You'll fill that out. It'll take 5 minutes at the end of the day. That way you can brain dump your day and start understanding when you're in execution mode and when you can come out of that and actually move more into strategic thinking. Now I'd like to answer some questions that I'm frequently asked. Is the coaching I do for leaders who are struggling? Absolutely not. It's actually just the opposite. I work with high performers, high achievers, successful managers, founders who've outgrown their current level. They know that they want to move onto a new level and they want to fast track that. Their current way of working is no longer working for them. And they've reached this level where there's a lot of complexity and a lot of pressure, and the old ways of working is just not helping you scale. The work is about moving out of good enough into clear and very intentional leadership. Another question I'm asked is, I'm too busy to pause. How do I make time for this coaching? If you're too busy to pause, you're likely stuck in the loop. We need to break this overly extended execution mode, running, very busy all the time, feeling the pressure. We want to break that cycle. And we don't find time for this, we create it, first of all, by clearing the way. We want to clear all those tasks and those responsibilities that are maybe draining your energy and they don't suit you anymore. And they're better suited for somebody on your team to do. At the back of your mind, you know that. So it's not about adding more to your day. It's about changing how you work already. We do need to find time if you're too busy and to clear the way. That would be one of the first steps. Another question I'm asked is, do you provide frameworks or templates? I've been doing this for 20 years and I've created the Mindful Act leadership model. It's based on the book that I wrote with Professor Passmore. And it integrates neuroscience, positive psychology, it integrates leadership practices. But my goal really isn't to give you any set framework or rigid template, is to work together with you to find what's useful for you. We together build your framework and see how your internal capacity can be improved, that you can make clean decisions under pressure with or without a tool in front of you. How do you know if you're ready for this? That's another question I get asked. It's a great question. If you're a founder, you definitely need this. If you're in transition, if your role is expanded or your company is that you're working for is scaling and your role is just more and more responsibility, so it's expanded faster than your ability to manage it. And maybe you're just tired of solving the same problems over and you're ready. You don't really need to have all the answers. You can come for a chemistry session. You do need to be willing. You need to be willing to experiment with me and open to a 15% stretch, because we do stretch and I'm going to be supporting you, but also challenging you just as much. And how long does this work usually take? It depends on you. We can do some meaningful shifts in 3 to 6 sessions. The goal is not long-term dependency, but it is to help you regain clarity, to strengthen your thinking and operate more strategically within the complexity of your role. There's this quote by Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. I invite you, my friend, to come out of automatic pilot, to be able to be more present. And in your presence, you will have the opportunity to choose how you're going to respond, to choose what you're going to be doing and not doing, and creating space to be that more powerful and empowered leader. And wishing you a beautiful day, and bye for now. Samantha, Amit.